On chapter 10, and we're going to go over social thinking. So first we're going to go over social behavior. So interpersonal attraction is pretty much influenced by a person's experience and similarity, proximity, and self-disclosure. Out of all of these, you guys 100% need to know, hint, hint, proximity is the strongest, okay? Proximity is the strongest type of interpersonal attraction. So aggression mostly comes from your amygdala, but we can also see it from testosterone and frustration. But you guys really need to know that your amygdala is in your limbic system, and in your limbic system, as this part of your limbic system, this part of your limbic system is going to be what controls your emotions, okay? So we have different types of attachment styles: secure, avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized. So the way these work is secure attachment is mostly found with parents with very good relationships. So let's say that the mom leaves the room, then the child starts crying, and when the mom comes back, the child will be happy again. The child runs to the mother. Avoidant is when the mom leaves the room, the child starts crying, but then even when the mom comes back, the child goes to the other person in the room. We typically see these when we have children who have negative parents. Ambivalent is pretty much no reaction. Pretty much we see this with children who have neglective parents, where even if the mom is in the room or not in the room, they don't react. Disorganized is regardless on who's in the room, whether it's one person or if it's the mother, the child is going to be crying and freaking out. We typically see these in very abused children. So there's different support types. So we have emotional, we have esteem, material, informational, and network support. Definitely remember all of these support types 100%. And then mate choice. So what makes us choose who we mate with is going to be phenotypical benefits, indicator traits, and then genetic compatibility. Okay, so now we're going to go over social perception and behavior. So social perception is pretty much forming images of others. Okay, how do we look at somebody else? So stages are the perceiver. So me, let's say me as a perceiver, I see my target, which could be, I don't know, let's say my organic chemistry teacher. And then the situation is, okay, what do I think about her when she's teaching? What do I think about Dr. Stalker when she's teaching? Is she talking too fast? Is she talking too slow? But stuff like that, okay? So impression bias is going to be you're really reliant on your first impression. So your first impression matters the most. Halo effect is pretty much overall impression and influences your judgment. So it's depending on the first impression that you get from them, the first overall impression, you're going to think of them as good or bad forever, regardless, right? It's different than first impressions because first impressions I feel can change. But as far as the halo effect, this is when you're going to look at a person and you're going to dictate if they're good or bad right away. The just world hypothesis, now this is definitely wrong, right? The world isn't a fair word, but in terms of this hypothesis in this specific situation, the just word hypothesis is pretty much saying that you get what you deserve. Okay, you work hard to get what you deserve. You don't work hard, you don't get what you deserve. But we see in practice this necessarily is not true. Self-serving bias is when you're telling, if you're successful, you're like, great, I did that. Right? Okay, I did well on my exam, right? I'm the one who did well. I studied really hard. But if you failed the exam, you're like, oh no, it's the teacher's fault. The teacher needs to know how to teach. They don't know what they're doing. Last but not least, we're going to go over a very important topic here. It's going to be stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. So definitely don't mix these up because you see these on every full length. So stereotype is going to be cognitive oversimplified beliefs, okay? Remember, the key word here is a stereotype is just a belief, okay? So a prejudice is pretty much an emotional response to something. Okay, you can believe in a stereotype and not be prejudiced, okay? There's definitely a difference between the two because stereotypes aren't always negative, okay? So when you have a prejudice to somebody, you're having a negative emotional response. Now, the discrimination, the difference between discrimination and stereotypes and prejudice is discrimination is actually action, okay? You're actually treating them differently. Having a prejudice is not discrimination. A stereotype is not discrimination. Discrimination is when you're actively treating somebody differently, not just what you think about them. So social stereotype threat is pretty much when, let's say that, how do I do this in a respectful way? They say that, let's say all Asian people are they work too hard or something. I don't know. Pretty much a stereotype threat is then the person is going to believe that they are working too hard. Or like we could use an example as like people of color, where they're like, okay, people of color do this or that, and now it's like the stereotype thread is going to be, oh no, am I going to be part of that group? Okay. Ethocentrism is pretty much judging others' culture by your own culture. So you don't understand other people's culture. When you see their culture, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. What I do makes more sense. Versus cultural relativism is pretty much going to say you're understanding their culture within their own context. So you are not comparing, okay? You are understanding. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to go over social structure and demographics.